he did this, but I want to know. And so when we finally came back after 10 years of living overseas, I found the Boston School, and Paul Wingerton in particular, and I ended up spending many, many years studying with him. I was part-time a lot because I had small children, but the reason that I learned what I learned was because of him, not because of anything I learned in art school. So what I would like to do is go through all that and sort of show you. So I think the most important idea to get through is that the Boston School, what they're doing, it's called Impressionism, but it's not like Monet Impressionism. The most important thing to try to understand is that it is trying to record truthfully what your eye sees in the way that your eye sees it. It's the big impression, you know, and it's how does every small part, how is it a part of this bigger impression? So that's why we call it Impressionism. But it is, the Boston School training is made up of two different things. One is French academic drawing, which comes from cast drawing, and the other was, by the time these Boston School painters had gone to Paris and were studying in the academies, you did have all these other people who were going outside and painting from natural light. Up until that point, especially portraits, they were done with academic color. Skin tone was one color. There was a kind of grayishness to the halftones turning the form. The shadow was another color. But once people started going outside and painting outside, they discovered that natural light did all kinds of amazing things, all kinds of incredible color. And that's what the Boston School tried to put together, this natural light, but keep strong form, not like Monet or Renoir where the form is all kind of broken down. So those are the two particular things that make up this way of seeing. These are not my cast drawings, but I used this slide to show you what the training was, side by side. You set up the cast side by side. And then what's important is you see this dark all the way over there and there. This is just a certain point in the cast drawing before the halftones are put on. But this is what we call the shadow. This is the shadow shape, and this is the shadow edge along here. And you can see, this is the actual cast, you can see here. And in this way of drawing, we keep this shadow, the darkest dark, we keep it flat. We don't, and so that all the, I'll show you in the next slide, all the modeling of the form comes in the halftones. And this is called something I never really understood. This line, where the shadow line, is actually called the bedbug line, and I didn't understand. I thought, what does that mean? Until somebody finally explained that bedbugs don't like light. So it's the point where the bedbug would come all the way up to that point and then turn around and go back because he doesn't. So it's the place where there's the biggest turning of the form. That's what that is. Okay, so this was this was my first cast drawing, and it's that you can see the charcoal's all starting to fall off and go down. But in this you see how again the shadow edge. The shadow is kept very simple and flat, and then all the modeling takes place in the halftones. That's where that's the French academic way of drawing, as opposed to somebody like Michelangelo who used more hatch marks or other things. But this is the French academic way. Okay, and this was a figure drawing, you know, same thing with the shadow, the very simple shadow line. We did tons of figure drawing. This is Edmund Tarbell, who I just show you a couple of the Boston School painters. Edmund Tarbell, this is one of my favorite paintings. It's in the Boston Museum. It's called Reverie. And this shows you another really important principle of this way of seeing, and that is that there are certain places, like along there, or you can see it along here. You see how sharp and clear those edges are there? And the rest of it, or especially up here in the hair, that's what we call lost and found. So there are places that are very, it has to do when two values are very much the same, the edge gets lost. It bleeds right into the, like in her hair, right into the background or you have edges that are softer because the contrast isn't as high. And the way that you see this, there are a lot of painters, if you look on the internet, there are a lot of painters who do this kind of thing, but it doesn't follow real visual truth. So the way, you probably have all heard of squinting. So you close one eye and half close way down, close the other eye, and that gives you the big dark and light masses, and it gives you the places where you have these sharp edges and the softer or the more lost edges. Is incredibly crucial to this way of working. And so, and Lost and Found is a really big part of the whole Boston School way of painting. I love this painting because it's a beautiful example of what we call interchange, where you have this big white shape and a big dark shape. But the white shape feeds into the dark shape with these little spots of light, and the dark shape comes into the light shape with little spots of dark. So that's what makes it interesting. This is Joseph de Camp. This is just a detail from his painting called The Blue Cup. This is also in the MFA. And you can see, just anywhere you look, you can see how beautiful, look how soft that is, how lost that, the division between the hair and the cheek. And then back here, how sharp. But even along the hairline, there are some places that are sharper and some places that are softer. The color, here it's very pink, here it goes very dark. And the other aspect of the Boston School is always this search for light, the drive of light, what the light's doing. And you can see here how it's really high and bright down here. And as it goes down the painting, down her apron, there's a fall of light. We're always looking for the change of light. You can see it in the background up here, how and there's color change too. It goes from pinkish red to lighter and then down into something bluer. So those are the aspects, that's the kind of stuff that we're always looking for in the painting. This is a tarbell, again, just a detail, but you can see how he makes these edges very clear, this spot right here, and look how soft and light something in the eye is. There's no formula here. You don't just begin by drawing eyes, nose, and eyebrows. It's the constant observation of what the whole thing is doing in the light. And that means that you have to look at the whole thing all the time. It's a bit painful in the beginning. It's like, you know, I don't know, maybe like riding a bicycle. You have to learn how to do it, and you have to make yourself do it until you begin to see it's how does each part add up and fit as part of that whole. So this painting's over here, but you can see again, it's the same idea. These edges and these edges up here set up everything else. So there's a hierarchy to the edges, to the way to, and her hair, everything in here is lost, you hardly see it at all, or over here. There's something else in this that is this cameo shape. That's another thing that Paul put a great deal of emphasis on, even in very early portraits, was don't just draw a head. So we had to have beautiful shapes, beautiful abstract shapes that were made out of the head, the neck, or whatever it was we were doing. This one's balanced a little bit by that piece of the chair. This I put these in. This is what, after I got out of BU, I'm starting back chronologically now. After I got out of BU, we went to live in Egypt, and I hired a lot of models there. But this was the way I was painting pre-Boston School, and you can see there were black lines around everything. It was, but it was fun. I had great models who came in, you know, wonderful, wonderful people. But really no sense of the order of all this. You know, how does all that fit into the bigger picture? This was an early, this was one I did as a student, and there are a number of these that were done as a student. And always sticking very, very carefully to that shadow line, making a big shape out of this. This one was fun, making that big shape out of that. And then all the halftones, all the modeling where the halftones are, just follows the cast drawing. It's the same idea. This was one towards the end of being a student that we did. And you can see, like, this edge is very strong, very readable. It's the play between the two that makes it more, it is the way we see. That's when you look at something, if you become aware of that, that's how our eyes actually record light and dark. We did a lot of other things too, a lot of still life. Same idea of finding a big interesting shape out of, it's what we call spotting, how the light shapes and the dark shapes compose on the canvas. This one was a commission, but again, you can just see, like, all of this is lost. There may be just one place where you can actually see. There are certain places that show up much more, or down here certain parts of the petals that show up more, and other places that are much more lost. But you compose the whole painting around that. You look at that from the beginning and you say, okay, where's my place of highest reading? How do I balance that in the rectangle? These are just some more still lifes from that time.
That's lovely.
And you know, again, the all this made up, this shape made up of something. When you have just one object that is your value shape, it's much less interesting than when you start combining values and together, parts of other objects that go together, and you make some more interesting abstract shape out of it. It's much more interesting. Your eye, the eye of your viewer, is the eye is very fickle. It's very it wants to be entertained all the time, and it gets bored really easily. So when the eye is looking at a painting, if you don't give it enough to delight it and keep it sort of saying, oh wow, it's going to move right off. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to look over here. I'll look at a different painting or whatever. I'm tired of this. So your job as a painter is to compose and make all these things in ways that the eye is going to be just delighted.
I have a question. Yes. Can you put that up? Yeah. So was that the actual still life that was arranged that you painted?
Yes.
So you arranged the still life?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
because that's terrific composition.
Yeah.
Everything, seriously, I mean, everything I've seen so far, I mean, I'm opinionated, but just, it flows along the whole bottom there and then comes up with the left side of that, whatever's in the back there. And then that little twist to the upper right there of the tweak thing is terrific.
Yeah, well, thank you, but we set everything up from the beginning.
Okay.
So we don't go and start putting, I mean, hopefully you get a good composition and then you paint it.
Okay.
So much of the work, much of the thinking goes in already from the beginning, setting up stage.
Okay.
This was an early painting that I never got to finish. She left, and I was never able to finish. But you can see how it's set up with those areas of strong readability, and then other areas that are much more lost. And I never got to finish things like that. This also shows you something that I'll talk about more in all the later portraits. Something I learned from Sargent, which is setting up a sort of off-balance triangle between the head and the hands. And that's something that he does a lot, and he does it very boldly. He'll push things way over to the side or whatever, but then he balances it in the rectangle. And it's something I've always found it's very effective, it works very well.
Is that Isabella Stewart Gardner's dress that she's wearing?
No, no, it was a model, and I was delighted to have my model, and then she left, and I couldn't, and that's what happens a lot when you work with still life is great, it never leaves. It's, and then after quite a lot of time and studies, I did a lot of portrait with Paul, because I knew that's what I wanted to do. This was in 2000, my husband died, and very suddenly, and I had 2 boys, and he was a teacher at Groton School, so the house belonged to Groton School. We had no house, no job. And everybody said to me, well, you're gonna quit painting and you're gonna get a real job. And I said, no, I've spent my whole life doing this, I'm not quitting until I have to. So I started doing commissioned portraits, and this one was a very early one. They gave me a photograph, but I loved the way the kids went together, and it's a small painting, but you know, still following that idea of looking for where the most readable edges are, where the light effects, where do things more sort of all blend together, and you know, the value, what we call value units. I would call all this a value unit, or even down to there, except for the light of his hair. This was also a commission, and it was just fortunate that she had such a beautiful dress, and a wonderful chair to paint as well. But you know, even when you look and play, there's not a lot of detail in there. But the, you know, going like along there, you just go to the places that read, but not other. That goes right into the neck. It's following that whole same idea.
How long does it take to do a portrait of a child? I mean, she moving.
I used a lot of photographs for this.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I had to.
I can't imagine it sits still very long.
She did sit later for her face. I went back and worked with her for her face.
Yeah.
This one was done all from life, and this is not a finished photograph. I think I went on a few more sittings with her. She was a lovely girl, and I had developed this. It was actually her parents that did this. They had a little DVD player, and they set it up on a stand right here where I stood, and the DVD player was right here. So they would look at the DVD player, and it looked like they were looking at me. But they, yeah, and that worked pretty well. That was a pretty good solution for a while. I did a lot from photographs. There was a family with 4 children, and that each one, when they reached a certain age, we did things. The trouble with photographs is, especially if you're working with children, you might actually end up getting a good photograph of the child, but then everything else is a mess. I mean, trying to get the whole thing together into one really good photograph is hard. This one I tried working with different diagonals, and tried to keep that and all these things working as a diagonal against, because this is not a terribly interesting pose, just one static up and down. So I tried to offset it with diagonals. And this was her sister, was in a different place, same buckets, same buckets and boats and things. Yeah. The trouble with photographs is that the color isn't always as good. This was a young girl, she was about 14, and when she came to be photographed, this was in Nashville, Tennessee, her father wanted her to have all these little collars, little sweaters and collars, and she brought this dress along in a little bag, and the shawl. And so we photographed, we went through all the clothes that she had brought that her father wanted her to wear. And at the last minute, she pulls out this black dress. She's 14, and she says, this is what I wanna wear.
Okay.
So I said, okay, go put it on, we'll take a few photographs. So we took, so those photographs ended up being, you know, what we actually used. The mother loved it, the father still didn't like it. This guy was a president of a lumber company, I think in Virginia. But this was getting, I was starting to get closer to sometimes being able to get what I wanted in posing them. And this one, this has that triangle with the head and the hands like that. It also has very strong edges that then set up the rest of the softer edges. See, there are just certain places where you pick out the sharper edges. But this also, coming to something else about spotting. In spotting, we often say that there are like three spots in a painting, but they can't be the same size. So it's going back to that idea about the eye getting bored easily. So you have one bigger spot, and then you have one that's not as big, and then one that's even smaller. So you have three different sizes of spots. This one, because of its value, sort of becomes one large spot. When you have hands too, you really don't want them to be doing the same thing. A lot of times people sit down and they'll put both their hands like this. I said, no, not, please don't make them do the same thing. And that's why the triangle is such a useful, good thing to keep in mind, because and also in portraits, the whole idea of it being on a diagonal, static like that little girl was, a static up and vertical or horizontal, both of those things are very static and not very interesting. So if you can find a way to make your composition on a diagonal, it's much more dynamic in the rectangle. You're always thinking, the first level of what you're thinking about is really abstract. I think that's the thing. Even though you're painting a realistic portrait, you're making an abstract statement first, which is, what are these shapes and values doing in my rectangle? And how do I get them to be pleasing because you think, well, nobody will notice that. People notice that all the time. It's like almost a subconscious level where people are responding to what those shapes and balance and all of that is on your rectangle. It's very important. And I can't, like with students, I try really hard to get them to understand that. They just want to paint the nose, you know, they're just after the eyelashes, but it is really important.
I have one quick question about that form, and I guess any of these ones where you show a sharp contrast, the dark and the light, and to me that shows in a way that that's the primary focus. My eye goes to the hands first, and then secondary to his face because it was in softer contrast.
Yeah.
And is that intentional to do that, or did you?
No, I think you know, because of the white shirt and the big and also a face has the face has more busyness in it, and the eye, psychologically, we respond to the busyness of the face almost first. It's possible that the slide could be a little washed out or something, but no, I would not have intentionally meant to look at the hands first.
And so not necessarily, the sharp contrast doesn't necessarily mean that's where you want your eye to go first.
Well, I guess your eye goes where it goes.
It does, yeah.
And it really is up to the painter to make it work. This was a commission of 3 children. I didn't have much control over the sofa, but the local sofa she's sitting on. But what I tried to do here was really create a very strong center of interest with the best color, sort of best edges, where she is the center, and then the 2 boys are kind of balancing her on either side. She was another. This is another diagonal, another strong diagonal. I did some of this from life and some from photographs. This one was from a black and white photograph. I mean, when you start doing this, you get hit with all kinds of things. People aren't alive anymore. Black and white photographs. People give you these horrible snapshots and say, "Can you please?" And you have to try to figure out how much you can tolerate. I mean, what your level of tolerance is for what you're willing to put up with. But this one was really fun to do because the background was really fun, and you know, the dress, that all the sort of lacy edges and things in the dress was fun too. This is a very large painting. This one was a lot. This woman arrived with that blouse, that background material, her elephants, and she wanted all that stuff in the painting. And what's important about this is that when we set up a portrait from life, the most important thing is that I start with the face and the background color, and I try to make sure that I get good light and good color on the face. You don't want the face to be yellow or orange or green. You really want a good color in the skin tone. That's one of the most important things about painting, is if you've ever seen any portraits where the skin is like brown or orange because it was done from a photograph, you just see it right away. It doesn't look very good. Well, to make her work with that green background was really just, and it's huge. It's like 50-something inches wide.
Wow.
And then that purple blouse. But, you know, and trying to get, like, also in the paint, you want things to relate to each other. Like, you want things to have common, like the edges of this purple flower have something to do with those kind of edges. The greens, so I have a lot of greens all around. The yellow, like the yellow of the flowers and yellows in here. So you keep looking for repeating themes and things that are going to help. I mean, this is a very disparate picture. I mean, it's like all this stuff. How am I going to make a painting out of all this stuff? That's one of the ways you do it. You start looking for similarities, different kinds of edges. How can you build rhythms? How can you start to put this, make some things relate to other things? Well, yeah, wow.
So we want her way.
At that point, I think I'd probably been doing this about 10 years, and I then went back and started doing a lot more painting from life again, because I just really wanted to. And I was still up in the studio where Paul was teaching. I had my own studio, but so I could come out and use the models. So this one's from life. But this you can sort of see that I have much more control over skin tone to background, that kind of color. The painting's over here, but this, you know, an edge like this sets up all the other edges. You know, you need a sharp edge to define what all the other edges are. And she was another model who came in. She came for I don't know how many days, and then one day she showed up with orange hair, which threw everything off. I mean, it's just, but what I liked about her, which I don't get much chance to do, I liked her moodiness. She was very moody, and kind of had this sort of, she had this sort of moody look. And when you do commissioned portraits, you don't get a lot of chance to explore stuff like that. You know, people want to look thin, beautiful, and happy. I mean, they don't want wrinkles. They want.
Do you ever say you don't appear thin or beautiful or happy, and therefore I won't take this commission?
No, I would never say that. I do sometimes make people. I mean, I do my best to make them look good. I try. I'd say that. Sometimes I eliminate some wrinkles and things, but
Sometimes that's a wonderful character.
it is sometimes, yes.
You spoke a few frames back about how much you were willing to tolerate as a from a photograph to work from, but you have to play with also what the commissioning person will accept as this rendition.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Do they want the truth?
Well, it depends on the person, but you know, I think when you meet somebody who you're trying to work with, and I have some later ones, you have to you just try to get a sense of what you think, how you think they want to be portrayed. You can pick up right away, like that woman in the purple was quite vain. She really wanted to look. Yeah, she really was. Some of the judges and the people, there's none of that. And you kind of, you have to kind of figure that out a little bit. So it's an interesting study in psychology. This is just another model. And this was another one, just doing something bigger. This is not a finished, I mean, the painting was finished, but that one wasn't. Then after like 2008, it was sort of after around then, the financial world changed, and lots of people who had commissioned family portraits at that point didn't. And so I went much more into what we call institutional portraits. And this was one of my earlier ones. That's Judge Mark Wolf, and he was the chief judge of the federal court at that time. And the background, I had to put a different background on it because his courthouse, this was the original courthouse he was in, which is at the John McCormick building in Post Office Square. And he had done all the Whitey Bulger cases. And he in the courtroom, in that courtroom, and he wanted that behind in his painting. And the book was by some judge. This was Judge Frank Ritter's old robe that he had been given. So there was a lot of stuff in there that meant something to him.
No little elephants or anything like that?
No. This is another judge in Virginia.
Charles should have hired you.
Yeah. And this
Are
is
these all around the
Margaret.
same size?
I'm sorry?
The judges, are they all around the same size painting?
They're all about,
Big.
yeah, about like that. This is Margaret Marshall, who was a lot of fun to work with. But I just show you a couple photographs, so sort of the idea of what it's, how you go and somebody presents you, well, here I am and here's my courthouse, and you start taking photographs, and how do you figure out what's the best, how you're going to show them? I actually like this photograph of her, but I don't like all those law books. I don't like the color, and I didn't. But she did not want to be seated, and so she would. Was in the John Adams Courthouse, which is down here Park Street, and she had just renovated it all, so she wanted to be out in the courtroom. So we ended up, that was the final painting. She was out in the courthouse, and she was more concerned about the marble. She never said anything about her face at all. It was more like the color of her marble and all that. But she had her red glasses, and the book was Gideon's Trumpet, was written by her husband Anthony Lewis. But in this one, trying to find what we call longer lines, where things all sort of work together to make to bring it together in the composition. Oh, there she is. That was in the Boston Globe the next day. Yeah. This woman, same idea, different. She was a dean at BU, and again, I went to photograph her. It was a terrible. It was just a terrible. She put on the robe. That didn't do it either. It was in her office. The light was pretty tough. I can't remember. I think it might have been a window there. And then she said she'd sit for me, and she arrived in my studio with this jacket that she had gotten, I think, from the Smithsonian museum store. She said, well, I know you like flowers. So she said, I thought this might be and it was a big improvement over, the other photographs. And she said she would sit, so that was her, and then that was the finished painting.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And she had her cell phone. She thought it was maybe old-fashioned, so she said, I gotta have something modern in here, so she put her cell phone under it. She was wonderful. She never looked at the painting until the very end, and she never said anything. She said, this is your painting, I want your painting. So she never said, most people say stuff, but.
How many sittings would you ask somebody to do in
Oh, she
person?
can quite a bit, 15, 20 sittings. I mean, a lot of people don't have that kind of time.
Yeah. At a minimum, could you do it in 5 sittings, or?
Well, not a big pain in the butt.
You have to have a lot, and then each session is an hour?
3.
3 hours?
Yeah. And because, you know, there's, I'll show you some others, there's studies, it's a long process, you don't just sit down and start painting right away.
Oh, there's a question in the back there.
Just this, on this line of process then, for each sitting, are you doing like a layer, like a base layer, or are you doing like a particular, like the eye or the nose? Or
You'll see, I think there are other photographs that'll start to show more the process. I've got pictures of, this one shows you an early stage in the painting. And it's based on, this one, there were 2 children, and they wanted it outside, but the day I got down there was raining. So we ended up doing it inside, but they wanted an outdoor background. And photographing, especially children outside, is problematic. So I have another one I can show you, because you get very deep shadows, you get very strong black shadows. So we photographed them inside, and then I had to put a different background on it. So I would say that this is maybe after 2 or 3 sessions. And it's based on not just drawing in eyes, nose, and mouth, it's based on what's readable. Where, like I said before, where's the highest contrast? Where are the things that read first more? And then color, you're putting in color. And does that answer your question at all?
Sort of, and I'm curious what.
Okay. And then that was the finished painting. Just keep, I just kept adding. This was 4 kids all in one painting. It was pretty difficult. And I did a lot of photographs of them in all different positions and all different. Oh, and the dog too. But that's a very big painting too. I don't know why I have that. This one, again, this was three children together. You want to, not just have 1, 2, 3. You want to make something interesting out of the. I love working with groups of people. I just number 2 or 3 because the abstraction is endless and beautiful. I mean, what you can do with people and figures and hands, and it just becomes so interesting. And this one, they all posed beautifully for the photograph, but this was done from a photograph. Because they would never sit like that. And then these two, again, and these 2 kids were just horrible. They wouldn't stop crying or fussing or. So we finally got this, and they said, "Oh yeah, we like that. I said, "Okay." So at that point, I was ready to just,
You can tell they want to be bad. That they're about to break out into mischief.
Yeah, he especially was hard to deal with. But I guess, still trying to, even when you have a photograph, still trying to look for the fun play of the hands, the sort of, and then the legs going through, making a bigger shape out of something. You're always kind of looking for some way to bring good painting elements into it. This is a photo. This was, he's now become a very good friend of mine. He was the retired minister at King's Chapel in Boston. And he did not want to be painted in his robes. He's a very humble, sort of simple man. So we spent 2 days photographing all around the church. I like this one very much. I didn't like this, the door, but I kind of like that. I like that, although it was a bit dark.
Nice face.
That was another one. He looks a bit cross there, but sort of the same idea. And then, I don't know how, we decided that we went into the vestry, and decided that maybe, because he said he would sit for me, and I thought, well, he can't stand, you can't stand 20 sittings, you've gotta be sitting. So we thought, okay, he'll be in his vestry sitting, and maybe somebody's coming in to talk to him. But this was in the church, so I actually tried to set it up in my studio, and I set the whole, we had all the books, I had all the stuff up there in the chair, and after about I don't know how many days I worked on this, I said to him, this is terrible, I can't do this. We have to start over, are you gonna kill me? And he said, no, he was wonderful that he decided he would go along and do it. So we set up, this is a start, this is maybe not even halfway through, maybe, but you see how everything is set up according to the highest readers, and then how the other things, like these aren't as dark as this. It's the big major values and colors, and then the things are put in according to how they read in their order in the rectangle. That's how it's painted. It's not painted with lines, or you don't go and paint the objects because they're there. You paint them in the order that they appear in the impression, in the big impression. You look confused. You look like you don't.
Can I ask you
Did they
a
always
long
appear
question?
there?
Yeah.
So I'm not even a painter. When I do editing and something like that, I do multiple, and it's called non-destructive, you can undo it. I'm very curious about if you have 20 sittings or something, and maybe you're doing stuff in between the sittings. I have a lot of anxiety. How do you avoid or deal with any feelings that you have about messing up the 17 steps that you've taken over months and killing, like, if you were on step 1 or step 2 and then you throw it out, like that's not too great, that's not too big a deal. But if you've gotten like through more than half or like 17 sittings, have you ever like totally messed up your 17 steps before?
No, because you don't do anything in that big whatever you're doing is quite small, and you're watching what you're doing, and you're saying, you might say, you might not have a good day, you might have lost a bit of color one day, you get it back the next day. You don't ever do anything that huge that all of a sudden the whole thing's gone. Except earlier I decided to trash that painting. I just didn't want to go on with that anymore.
Why did you decide that you couldn't recover that other?
I didn't like the composition. I didn't like, I just felt like it was,
That's interesting.
I didn't like it, and I just felt like it wasn't doing, I don't know. So that, and then that's a little bit farther along, see his face is a little more developed. This is what I was telling you, it gets developed, but always in the whole, as the whole thing looks. This is maybe most of the way towards being done. The idea was that, again, he was sitting in his study and somebody comes in to say something. I don't have the details in the books. This was a backpack because he likes to hike. So at some point, when I got working on his face, he said, well, I look too serious. I want to have a little more of a smile. Well, you can't hold a smile very long, especially an older, his face would really fall. So at that point, I needed to have a photograph and actually just work with the smile part from the photograph. And then that was the finished painting. So you can see how it sort of progressed from those stages. At some point, I think in 2014, I spent 2 months in Jordan, and I was interested in, because I had painted a lot in Egypt a long time ago before that, and there was something called the Jordan River Foundation, and I wanted to go and paint these interesting faces. I was just tired of commissions, and anyway, I spent 2 months there. I took a lot of photographs. I started a bunch of paintings. This was the only one I actually finished because in the end I ended up working from photographs anyway. So back to here, this was a judge. She had the wonderful idea, this is an early stage of the painting. She had the wonderful idea to have this great, beautiful colored scarf, which was really nice. And that's the finished painting. With all her, you know, her children and her books and things that are in there.
Do you have certain techniques for drawing accuracy? It's like I've seen the photos being the same size as them.
Yes, I get them as close as I can
Yeah.
to being life size. It's hard, it's just one more thing I don't need
Yeah,
to
exactly.
struggle with.
But then you have other things you do to get the, I call it the drawing, but you know, the line placements in the right place.
I often use a mirror. I stand back,
Yeah,
turn
yeah.
behind and look at them both in the
So just
mirror.
looking back and forth. Do you do sight size or do you?
No, 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 everything is proportional, everything is relational. I don't know why I put this in here, I guess it was just a sort of, I don't know why. This was another, because I did this one at this point, I was also trying to keep working from life. And this was another one from life, but this is again a beginning, like you set up the big light effect. You set up all the big, before you go for all the detail, you set up the big abstraction, which is all of this. You set up, so all those things are set, and then you develop it. But this is important. This comes first in the painting, the consideration of the big stuff. This was a little girl, and I just hated that clock. But the parents, they said, she's going to inherit that clock. It has to be in the painting. So I'm not proud. If you could take the clock out, I would like the painting. But I really, this is where, and then I have to say to myself, do I need the money? Do I need to do this? I do.
Did they want it set at 6:20 as well?
Yeah, well,
These are significance.
this was a doctor from Children's Hospital, and his biggest concern was that he look happy and show his, he was a wonderful guy, and he had a great sense of humor, and he wanted that to show in the painting. The only place I ever got a really good picture of him was upstairs in his house. This ended up being the photograph everybody wanted to work from, but I had to put a different background on it. So I tried drawings. This gives you an idea of the stages. I mean, the drawings and the studies. This was a study, just a plain background. These are small. These are like these studies. They're little 9 by 12 or 8 by 10. This was another one, trying to figure out what to do around him. I like the red tie. His wife nixed the red tie. She said he looks too much like whoever, I don't even remember who was president at the time, but she did. So the red tie had to go, so he had a gold tie. He was Lebanese, so he wanted it's some saying that was in Arabic, and then that was some molecule that he invented. So they went to that. We did try pictures of his children. That didn't work. This one was tough. I just could not get the right background on him. Finally, that was the end of the painting. But his face, they were very happy with his face. His face was really great. I've never done anything like that before, where I just put something decorative on this side.
It works, yeah.
Yeah. This painting was done, a donor of the building, it was his parents. It's a black and white photograph that was taken, it was about this big, taken back in like 1930. He didn't have a coat on, she didn't have those clothes on, she had a hat, so she didn't have hair. So this painting really had to be invented, most of it had to be invented.
Did you enjoy that?
I did, I enjoyed this one because the color was fun to play with. And I'm just showing you the range of things that you get asked to do when you do this. This, blessedly, this is Dennis Saylor, who is now the Chief Judge of the Federal Court, all from one photograph, and the whole photograph is just, I mean, it's like when you paint from life. It's all there, it's all in its right order, it's all doing what it's supposed to do. So this was really a pleasure to paint this one. And then this was a judge from Worcester, but we had to put a different background on it. This was a doctor from somewhere in Boston, I don't know, who wanted to be painted in quite fancy clothes. And now this one, this is the photograph, this I'm going to go back to the children outside. You see, the mother wanted these girls with the purple bows, the lilacs, and the white dresses, and she wanted them outside. Can you put the...
Yeah.
Okay. Look at what happens with the blackness. Look at the strong shadows.
Yeah.
But and then they're squint because they can't see. It's too bright. So that was a real problem. So we ended up taking the pictures inside, and then you have to do all this crazy stuff and put a different background on it. Yeah. This was Martha Minow, who was the dean of Harvard Law School, and she was a tiny little woman. She's a very dynamic, wonderful woman, but she's short. And she said to me the first day, she said, my painting has to be as big as Elena Kagan's, because Elena Kagan was the first dean of Harvard Law School, first woman. And in the Widener Library, all those paintings of the men from, they're all huge paintings. And she, rightfully so, wanted her painting big too. So I thought, how am I going to make a big painting out of a small person? So I ended up doing it by putting her sort of leaning against her desk, and then with all of her books, and that was in her office. And that was I don't know, there's a big color difference here. They're just different, they're different cameras and different photographs. But then, and then, since this is not so interesting, losing a lot of that. I needed the height, I needed the space, but still sticking, like these portraits, sticking to, where the sharpest edges, where's the highest contrast, where are the big light effects.
Mary, you wear grid photographs, or you grid?
No, I do. I paint from the photographs as if it was life, as if it were a real person. Maybe I should. This one, she was a Don at Harvard, and she was almost 90, and she came up to my studio, and the north light really didn't do her any favors, and we almost were going to just go with a photograph like that when she went out for dinner, and a friend of hers at dinner, probably after a glass of wine, took this photograph. So she emails me the photograph, and she said, could you do the portrait from this photograph? And I was like, oh my God. What? I mean, all the dishes and her hand, her arm is coming out like this, the white table, the white background. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? But I could understand why she liked it so much. She looks so much happier, prettier, better. And also, here she is, she's yellow. It's artificial light, and she's yellow. So we arranged to go back to the same restaurant, and I was going to try to photograph her, maybe get a whole photograph that would work, but at least try to get her body, which is actually what we ended up doing. So I had to end up pasting that head on her body. So that was another difficult one. You can see when you get one where you have one photograph, like the judge, it's a dream just to have that. And there she is. That was from Magdalen College in Cambridge, England. So there she is, along with all the other guys. He was just a doctor from. And then this guy came with all his nautical stuff, and he wanted a portrait with all of his nautical stuff. So that ended up being the portrait. But you can see again the diagonal, the triangle using the head and the two hands, and then just trying to figure out a way, like this is this diagonal with that, trying to figure out a way kind of build unity with all these disparate objects.
Was it his choice to have the cannon facing his head?
He never said anything about it. He saw the painting all the time, and he never said.
Good observation.
Yeah. This one is quite a recent, it's only in the last year or two. And I did this for me, it was I just wanted to, and it was from life. And it was just playing games with all this stuff that's lost, and then picking up all these, like finding all these, the abstract shapes, even though you have something that's very realistic, it's to me it was like a waterfall of just effects.
Mhm.
And it was so much fun to paint. That was the beginning of it, so you can see that.
Your beginning sketches look a little surrealistic by themselves they don't have the eyes
And don't have the
features.
eyes, yeah. Well, but they are, and then I've already finished this one, but I was working on one more from her. But do you have that
Yes.
little,
You want-
just to show you at the end, this one, she went back and, cause she took a picture at the end of every session, and then she put it together in a time lapse, which it just takes a minute.
Yeah,
So, but maybe you can see a
It takes
little.
maybe 13 seconds. I can slow it down though if you want me to.
And each one of those is about a 3-hour session. Wow. That's wow.
Yeah.
But that's how, I mean, I don't draw it before it, because the whole thing is you want to get the color and the light,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so, and as soon as you put in drawing, you're already worried about your drawing.
It's interesting, on some of the early ones, you can already see which edges you've decided are going to be hard and which ones are soft,
Yeah,
and it continues all the way to the end.
yeah, so. Cool. Yeah, okay.
All right.
Thank you.